Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Joe Delera and Jim Turvey. This is your week 2 NBA in-season tournament guide. We're going to talk a little bit about what we saw in the first night of the NBA's in-season tournaments. If you missed them, or if you were recovering from the courts burning your retinas out, we'll go through kind of what the ramifications are, what we saw in those games, how to bet them in general. We'll talk a little bit about the dynamics of where the group odds are at, all those types of things. Don't know if we'll get best bets today, but we're at least going to give you a little bit of pathways, and we'll probably find some things that we want to bet in the in-season tournament. I want to let you know that everything we talk about can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. You can find articles. You can find all sorts of cool stuff. You can track Joe Delera's props and the escalators as he continues to absolutely hammer rebounds. You can catch Jim Turvey. You can catch me. You can catch Brandon Anderson, all sorts of stuff. Check it out in the Action Network app. Also, make sure to check out the YouTube channel for the Action Network, youtube.com/the Action Network. You get to catch all of our live shows, all of our podcasts. We've got great content. Our Green Dot Daily Show, I'm on Mondays and Wednesdays. Talk a big picture. I'm going to be doing like an NBA State of the Union, so I'm excited for that. Lots of cool stuff. Check it out, youtube.com/the Action Network. All right, let's talk a little bit about the in-season tournament. So Friday night, a lot of conversation about it, and if nothing else, the league did manage to make sure everyone knew that these games were different. We will deal with the biggest thing, which is the courts. Joe, you have 3 options. You are pro the new courts, anti the new courts, or pro some of the new courts, but not all of them.
I'm going to say pro some of the new courts, but not all of them. I can't tell if I just need a bigger TV or if I was like but my eyes hurt. Maybe I need a new prescription, but I did kind of like some of them. I thought they made the uniforms make some more sense.
Jim Turvey, pro, anti, or pro some,
like,
anti some?
Yeah, I think I'm with Joe. It definitely made you realize you were watching something different, which I think has some value, I guess. If you're gonna do it, right? So I think there is so it's like a reminder to both the audience, to the players that and theoretically this should be something different. And theoretically, hopefully it's something you care maybe even a little bit more about. I am a child of the 90s who loves really bright colors. So it didn't hurt my retinas as much as a few of them I just didn't think were all that well done. But I love, I know people hate like the Diamondbacks, the teal and the magenta. I love it. Give me all the bright colors. Give me Nickelodeon vibes. Maybe not like a NFL Nickelodeon game, but I love those bright colors. I love stuff like that in general. So I actually, I kind of liked it. I didn't hate it as much as some others did.
So I think the consensus is that the red does not work. It's too bright, and it's offensive to people's eyes, and that makes sense just because literally you're not supposed to paint rooms red, because if you do, it makes people angry. Like, it literally stimulates parts of your brain and makes you angry. And so you probably shouldn't do that. The blues I thought were very good. I like the Indiana one a lot. I like that shade of blue, the peacock blue as it was called. And I'll tell you, being at the Nuggets game, I really enjoyed the Nuggets color. Like, it was actually really cool to see that game. And it was kind of cool. Like, I'm going to remember that game. It was cool. Everyone kind of liked the stripe down the middle, if nothing else. Maybe that's what they changed for next year, is they put the rest of the court fine, and then the bright stripe across for the tournament games into the keys. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. Jokic had an interesting thing, which I asked him about it, and he was like, I actually kind of think that it felt like the courts were bigger. And I thought that was interesting. There were dead spots, but nothing too bad. They managed to get them. I saw them got maintenance. Denver, they painted them wrong. The 3-point line was incorrectly painted pregame, and so they had to go get that fixed. Not a great look, but hey, everyone's ironing out stuff, and it was okay. I bet the unders, being like, ooh, all these bright colors, they're going to be disoriented. That was not a good idea. Overs went 5-2 on the night. Favorites went 4-3 straight up, but just 1-6 against the spread. That's fascinating to me, that on a full day's rest, nobody was on a back-to-back. Only the Knicks were 3-4. Typically what we sorry, Joe, that typically what we see is if you cover as a dog, you win 62% of the time. Straight up. That's the total mark in the NBA since 2003, and it holds steady since 2018. But this was the exception. And what does that kind of tell us? Which is, to me, it's an indication of, I think the competition level was a little bit higher. I think they actually kind of try to win these games for whatever reason, which I think is really interesting. The overs going 5-2. One thing that I asked before I got sucked into the court thing was I was like, hey, third tiebreaker is how many points you score. Now, I don't think that these teams are like really thinking about it, but I just think it's interesting that for whatever reason, and Jim, I'll start with you. Look, it's 7 games. Maybe all the games on Friday go under. But I just thought it was interesting that we have all of these games go over 5-2 to the over there, and that dogs competed a little bit more just in a losing effort. I thought that those dynamics being a little bit different from NBA trends overall was interesting, given it was a different environment.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting because I tend to like my prior is that a more competitive game. I'm going to look a little bit towards an under as well. You know, a game 7, like you want to talk about the most extreme and versus, you know, on the other end, the All-Star game, right? And it when there's less effort, I think more points. When there's more effort, I tend to think fewer points. So it's also interesting that I kind of agree with your theory. I do think that the teams were trying, you know, maybe it's 5% more, maybe it's, you know, not really notable, but any little edge could be key. But then we got these overs, so I'm with you in wanting to see another week or two, or you know, it's in all likelihood we probably just need to see the year, but that's not fun for bettors, right? We don't want to wait out a whole year, so let's try to at least use our eyes and see some things. And I do think that there was a solid level of competition. I was hook, line, and sinker on your theory on the courts and like a shooting eye. That's something I do genuinely believe in. So I haven't seen enough to maybe go off of the under train, probably just enough to not play it for this Friday, but kind of keep an eye. You know, if we go 2-5 to under next time, then it's like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe there is something here, but they might get more used to the courts. For me, it's a whole lot of really interesting talking points with not a whole lot of actionable items out of that. But the one thing betting wise, I did notice, I definitely wanted to touch on is, and I think it's fair, but the books have reacted very strongly to one win or one loss, and that's because there's only 4 games, right? But you can now, I mean, in future reference, I think we knew it was coming anyways, but I think Joe, you really were able to highlight this before. But if you that first matchup is going to be really key, because if you get a team who's a long shot but at a winnable game in their first game, you're going to be able to leverage that really well. And then the inverse, if we get a team that we like but they have a tough loss, and maybe, you know, we don't want to write them off entirely. I'm looking at the Mavericks at plus 900 to win that group right now. You know, Jamal Murray just went out for an injury. The Clippers are the Clippers. You know, we've talked about them, if they're going to be able to work in everyone right away. The Pelicans are always, you know, injury prone. And then you've got the Rockets at plus 900. They played the Mavericks, or they played the Nuggets pretty decently. I'm not willing to write them off entirely just off of one road loss in Denver. I think that the books are really, you know, because it's a 4-game total, like they have to kind of react strongly. But I think there's maybe some longer numbers there after one game, or in the inverse, looking ahead towards this Friday saying, hey, who's got a winnable matchup at a long number who we can then use as an instant leverage chip, because there's only so many games. We really got to kind of use that to our advantage.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the things I keep thinking about is the wild cards. That's what I keep thinking back to.
That's true.
Where the Mavericks are now 40-1 to win the in-season tournament, when, despite losing to Denver, I think it's very possible that they wind up securing a wild card spot. And if the Mavericks win a wild card spot, I return back to, again, we'll see, you know, Luka's health, etc. But can the Mavericks win 3 games in 5 days? Yes, they can. Like, that's all I'm really looking for is, can you win 3 games in 5 days? If they make it into the wild card, they can do that, because it's like, that's the whole value of this being a single elimination tournament versus all of these the playoff series, when it's like, sure, you can get a game, but are you going to beat him 4 times? This is just like, nope, Luka went nuts, had 50 points, you're out. That's as simple as it goes. Joe, the big swing games, Denver over Dallas was a big swing game. Bucks over the Knicks. The Warriors in what I thought was a bullshit game over the Thunder. The calls in that were frustrating. But you are not overreacting to, just as Jim mentioned, the books have. You're not overreacting to the Knicks loss to the Bucks.
No, not really, because in part, I felt like New York had some opportunities to win, right? Like they probably played. I think there were a couple missed calls late in the game, but like that's not even really the point. But I think they played Milwaukee good. Obviously, Jalen Brunson was incredible, but that group is terrible. I think I don't like I'm very low on Miami. Obviously the Wizards are not very good. And then Milwaukee has been so not they just haven't looked great on the season. And then obviously like the Wizards aren't good. The Hornets I don't think are very good either. So the Knicks, you're getting a longer number than the Hornets right now to win the group. And I think any of those teams, just like because of the way like their offenses are, like especially like the Wizards and the Hornets more so than anybody, I guess, because Miami just their offense is like non-existent besides Tyler Hero. But they like I think one of those teams could maybe beat Milwaukee if they just get hot from three or something. And then all of a sudden you're in this like really weird scenario where, maybe you have all these teams that are like you have a couple teams that are like 3-1 or or whatever, like or 2-2 or whatever the circumstance is. I think at plus 950 it's a little bit long considering the three matchups that the Knicks have left are Charlotte, Washington, and Miami. And like they could easily go 3-1 there and just hope somebody beats Milwaukee, out of one of those remaining games. But obviously Milwaukee should win. I'm just saying I think plus 950 is a little long considering I think New York would be favored in their, well, they probably won't be favored against Miami, even though they should be, but the other two games they should be favored.
That's funny because I get the other way where I I get to wait, okay. So the Knicks are already a game behind, and the Heat are already a game up, and the Heat are going to get I think the Heat get the Bucks at home. So
They do.
It would be very Bucks to lose that game.
No, and that's kind of what I'm getting at though, because like the Knicks still would have to play like if Miami takes care of Milwaukee, but then the Knicks beat Miami, because like I think that like just the way that the nature of this tournament is, like and you get to play, you get those other games against the Hornets and the Wizards, which the Knicks, like what they do is they beat like those bad teams. Like that's generally what they do. They beat the bad teams.
Right.
So I'm not really worried about those two. But like Milwaukee, we've seen like just lose some stinkers because they just want to play drop, like because it's the regular season and that's the way that they treat it. They don't do anything special defensively. And then like I could see like a Washington or a Charlotte just winning a game that they absolutely shouldn't win. And then, Miami kind of always plays them tough. So that's kind of where I'm coming at with the plus 950. I think it's just like a touch long when, Milwaukee I think that they still have some issues this early in the season.
I'll be really curious to see the Nuggets are minus 125 to win Group B, which is the toughest one. It's Pelicans, Clippers, Mavericks, Rockets. Clippers got, I think, the worst lie of the schedule on that. Yeah. Clippers are at Mavericks and they're at Nuggets. They get Rockets and Pels at home. So they go up against the two toughest teams in this, if it's not the Clippers. The other two really tough. If we say like there's three top teams, it's Clippers, Mavericks, and Nuggets. The Clippers have to go on the road to two of those, and that's just really tough. Otherwise, I think I'd probably be betting Clippers right now, based off of what happened. I think Denver looks incredible. Jamal Murray is going to miss some time with his hamstring. Part of me does kind of wonder, like, I just don't know that Denver wants to be like traveling to Vegas and doing this whole But the problem with Denver is I don't think that they can help it. I don't think Denver is like, we're going to win this in-season tournament. They're just like, we're going to beat anybody in front of us. Like, we're just going to beat anybody in front, especially if we're at home. And they're going to have the semifinal games or the quarterfinals at home if they win the group. So yeah, Jim, I think it's that group has so many teams that we like. Like, I like the Clippers, I like the Pelicans, I like the Mavericks, and Denver may just be like, we don't really care, but we're better than you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's if you're doing it, it's definitely just Denver is a odds-on favorite right now, and Mavericks are 9-1, and you're holding your nose and saying, there's a little bit of value just on like a slight overreaction off of that first game, and Dallas haven't gotten their toughest game out of the way.
Joe, you mentioned that no one's played, like, the rotations aren't changing, which makes sense to me. Where I got to on the group stage games is that you won't see any changes in rotation until you reach semifinals. Yeah. And even semifinals, it's like, the best way I can kind of think to phrase this is you want your star players to play about 32 minutes. That's ideal. It's like they play 32, they win all their minutes, and you can, like, theoretically you want them to play like 20 and they just kill everyone and you rest them. But like, normal game, 32 minutes for starters, 16 minutes for bench, right? I think that if we get to the semifinal game maybe that goes to 35-36. Like that's the only
Yeah.
real kind of difference that I can see. Other than that, like I do think that for props, I think these are going to be like just any other NBA rotation night until unless we start to see an overtrend, in which case we got more scoring.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things, right? Like when I was looking at the Friday games, the only player that played over 40 minutes, at least from my look, was Jalen Brunson, which is just so Knicks, right? But like he was also just absolutely cooking. So I think like it made sense that he played that many minutes just because he was so good. I think that especially right now, it's notable that like all the guys are playing, right? And we've kind of talked about this on previous episodes. I know you talked about this with Andrew, and it was like the players are playing. So I think like when you look at these games, you don't want to cap it and say like, all right, well, like it's a back to back, like, or like I know Boston has one coming up this Friday, Saturday, and the tournament game is Friday, right? So I think when you look at it based on kind of what has been said like from around the league, just like play your guys, like it's important. I think that you're much more likely to see everybody playing in the tournament games than maybe sitting on like the back end of the back to back or whatever the other game is, right? So I think that that's notable, especially when you're looking at props. It's like some of these games, especially like let's talk about the Clippers, for example, right? Like the Clippers have notoriously rested Kawhi, Paul George, maybe even Harden now, right? They're a team that I would look at and be like, normally if there's a back-to-back and be like, I wonder if they're going to sit them this game, that game, whatever. I think now you can be a little bit more confident in saying like, no, like they're probably going to play this game and taking advantage of like what the prop lines are like at the tip or like at the post and say like, these are probably right. Like these are about accurate. I don't think you have to wait as long sometimes for some of these injury like news and I wouldn't be anticipating people being ruled out due to rest, at least in these tournament games for now anyway. And I think maybe like you kind of mentioned, as the games go on and as we get closer to like elimination play, maybe that's when we'll see some guys see like slight upticks in minutes. But I do think that it might come down to like a player thing too, or if the team is in it and the coach and the organization has a conversation, it's like, you guys want to go for it? Like, do you guys want to play an extra couple minutes? Because we can change our rotations that way. But I don't think they're going to be doing anything like scheme wise that's super different. But maybe they'll add a couple minutes for these guys, when it gets competitive.
Fresh off yesterday's episode where Jim Turvey said that we should sprinkle on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to win the full season MVP.
Listen,
from the podcast
that brought, and I joined.
From the podcast that brought you that. How about this? How about Paul George, tournament MVP 48-1? Wouldn't it be a very Paul George thing to win this thing? Like, wouldn't that just like adds to the Paul George arc?
Well, like, and what I really like about that is it goes along with kind of a broader theory that I have brought to the tournament MVP is, a second fiddle on a team that we really like. So, I think maybe my favorite is Kristaps Porzingis. He's not second fiddle, maybe he's more third or fourth, but these lower players, because it's only going to be 7-game sample, and let's be honest, they're really going to be focusing on those final 3 games. Yeah. Anyone can. It's not a 7-game series, not the full playoffs. Looking for a little bit of chaos on a team that we think will do well. Tyrese Maxey's out there at really long numbers. So some of those teams that we really like, Jamal Murray. Now he just got hurt, so maybe he's not going to be putting up enough stats to grab that. But the theory of the second player on a team that we really like, I do think is one that holds value, at least from how I'm reading. The small sample size of it, but also that we do think that come the end of this tournament, it is going to be one of the big dogs that takes it team-wise.
For the big games on Friday, Clippers face the Mavericks. That's obviously a huge one. So I'm like, help me out here. If I like the Paul George bet, do I wait? Because if the Clippers lose that game, the value is really low because the Clippers also have to go to Denver. Or do I bet it now because the number probably drops if the Clippers do in fact beat the Mavericks on Friday? Like this is the buy low versus these kind of spots. Like I think
I don't know if it would drop that much.
I think
you should wait.
Yeah.
I think you should play it. I think you should play it because why? if the Clippers beat Dallas is out. I think so. Luka immediately comes out of the odds. I think you have to play it now. Whereas if they don't lose, or if they do lose, they still are tied, at least in the loss column, with Dallas. So like worst case scenario, they're like they have the 0-1 spot, but like, and they realistically have to beat Denver, which sucks. But, if you have a statement win over Denver and Paul George looks awesome, then like, I think that's fine too. I think you have to bet it sooner because of the fact that Dallas is 0-1 already. Because if they're out, like if they lose, then the Luka, that whole team is really like kind of out of the scenario, I think.
I do like that. I loved I loved a couple bets in this for tournament MVP, which were Luca and Shea, and they could both be dead by Friday. That's
right. And Shea didn't even play. Like,
yeah, Shea didn't even play. Shea's out. Shea's not playing.
Shea's out.
The other one, Lakers Suns, I think is kind of interesting. I mean, look, Lakers in general. This is not a in-season tournament thing. This is just like Lakers need a good win. We're recording this on Sunday night. They lost to the Magic. They face the Heat tomorrow. Lakers are in a bit of a spiral, and the Suns are starting to teeter a little bit too. They're early, good start without Book and Beal is starting to take a little bit off of them. So that's a fairly desperation spot. It's too early for that. It's whoever loses that game is going to have a bad narrative early season surrounding them. That's the best way I can put it. Like long season, they can get out of it, but that one's pretty interesting, I think, just from more of an NBA perspective.
The Lakers group odds were one other bet that I was potentially looking at, in part because I think that they've played by far the hardest schedule so far. So I was actually down on the Lakers a little bit before this season. And I've actually been impressed with it. I actually think they haven't been terrible. The biggest thing with them is as long as their two big stars are around and playing most nights, yeah. I'm totally fine with riding with the Lakers. I just don't think that's going to last. But if you're looking at this from a short-term outlook, I think that they're better than the Suns right now. So I think that the odds for that group should be flipped, to be honest. And
let's talk about that. Suns plus 110, Lakers plus 250, Blazers plus 650, Jazz plus 700, Grizzlies plus 900. That's right. The Blazers have a better chance to win than the Memphis Grizzlies. Good God, what happened to my poor team
after that win?
So yeah, that's the thing, right? That's like the nightmare scenario is if like the Blazers make it out of this group and the NBA is like, oh no.
I was looking at all these teams because I do think it's a very vulnerable group, and I couldn't get there on the Blazers or the Jazz. They're just not good teams, and like it is a 4-game sample. But like I really think the Lakers are a pretty solid team who has all of their pieces. They do have a few players out right now, but the two key pieces in the cog are there right now, and they're playing decently. They've just had a really hard schedule. To be honest, this group play is going to be easier than the games they've had to start this season. So I think that the Suns should not be about odds on favorites. I don't see any world in which that should be the case. And I can't really get to any of those longer numbers. I really tried to talk myself into the Jazz, but they really have not been good. They struggle against teams that are even halfway decent. So I think that Lakers 250 is actually a pretty decent look.
Yeah, I like the Lakers there. I think that I like them. I'm probably going to like them on Friday when they play too. But I think that you're right, Jim and Matt. Really, like the way you should bet it, especially because their hardest game is first. Like in theory, you should be betting them to win the group, along with any like money line bets that you have on the game. One spot that I know that's standing out to me right now is Tatum to win the tournament MVP is 13-1 out there. Which I think is way out of line compared to what Boston's odds are to win. Boston's odds to win are 8-1. Like, I don't see a scenario where Tatum doesn't really win. Like, I know that we've like had the Jaylen Brown thing, like where we thought he was going to win in the Eastern Conference Finals the other year, but like Tatum is so good. And like, I think that like in order for them to win in that type of scenario, you probably need Tatum to go off. And I think that like the odds are out of whack enough with where Boston's odds are at 13-1. I think it's definitely worth a bite on a way to get probably like at least the top 2 team in the NBA right now.
Hey, one thing I just thought of really quick. Oh, sorry, Matt. Just one thing I thought of really quick. I couldn't even try it yet, so I don't know if anyone tried this before the last one. You probably can't parlay Lakers to win the group and like Lakers to win on Friday, right? Because that's an interesting way. I figured you couldn't. No. It was too correlated, but okay, never mind. Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, you can parlay the winners, which I think is kind of interesting. The last one I kind of want to talk about is the Wolves, who are in a group. They're plus 450. Warriors are minus 105. That's an absurd number, I think, given that they barely got past OKC. Kings plus 275. So the Kings are shorter. Spurs plus 900. Thunder at 14-1 after losing that game. Look, if Shea's not going to play, then that's one team. One of those good teams is now out of that. The Kings, I think, are good, but I think the Wolves are better. So that line is inherently off to me at plus 450. I like them before. I have a bet on them already, but I think the Wolves are a really good bet there, where I can't really put my finger on it. I think the Warriors are good. I'm not sure that they are elite tier. And if they're not elite tier, that opens the door for a Wolves to sneak this out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the Kings play OKC on Friday. So, like, that's kind of one of those games, like, one of them could be out, or they both could kind of be out. So, I think that your inclination's right. And like Minnesota is good. Like, they have a lot of like elite talent. I think they have a lot of things they can do to like match up in like any particular one-on game.
Now, the problem might be that they don't play the Thunder until the 28th at home. And so if Shea is out on Friday, they lose. They can't win the tournament, but Shea comes back and they beat the Wolves. Like, that's a very likely scenario, because like OKC will genuinely look at it as like this might be a tiebreaker for playoffs. So
I mean, Rudy Gobert is going to have 25 rebounds in that game. I will tell you that right now. Like it's going to happen.
And Joe will bet for him to have 25 rebounds in that game. He will find all the escalators, and you can find that in the Action Network app. All right, that's going to wrap it up for our discussion of the in-season tournament. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. My thanks to Joe Dolera and Jim Turvey. They'll be back with me next Monday for best bets and weekend recap and futures. You can catch them meanwhile in the Action Network app and all over actionnetwork.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.